So after the previous conversation, we are looking at what is the best way to learn something faster from an ICAI textbook. Okay. Right now, if I'm doing this for the very first time, I'll first look at the scope. So the scope is what it has got some 47 pages in terms of content. Okay, it has 47 pages. Now there are two things: time-based learning and task-based learning. So if I have to complete something, let's make it task-based. Let's not have a timeline to this, but let's try to complete it in a single sitting. Sometimes it helps you to build your capacity. Okay, whatever time it takes, let's complete it. Now, if I had to complete this, let's say I'm doing it for the first time, it says Indian Accounting Standard 16. Okay, 16, that's fine. Now it talks about three things: property, plant, equipment. The first and foremost thing which I would do is what is plant, what is property, what is equipment. So this is what I would try to analyze and understand. So I'll focus on what are the inclusions in this definition, inclusions, and what are the exclusions, and what are the exceptions. So this is exactly what I want to understand in a tabular format, because it's talking about plant, property, equipment. Because it looks like we know it, but what could be property and what could be equipment? What could be plant? If you technically think about it, you're not very clear about this, right? So this may or may not be directly related to the exam, but I definitely would like to explore more on this. So this is where I put in some time. Done. Then what exactly is the objective and scope? So I would write a single sentence about the objective and scope by quickly going through here. So the objective is given here. The objective is to prescribe the accounting treatment for these three things, so that users of the financial statement can discern information about an disinvestment in this. So it's largely about the accounting treatment, and probably there's something about recognition. There's something about the carrying amounts and depreciation charges, impairment losses. So I won't dwell deep into this, but it talks about one, accounting treatment; two, information; three, recognition; four, carrying amounts, depreciation charges, impairment losses. So I would roughly try to understand it in a very quick way. We just spend 1 minute here; it is done. Now, in terms of scope, so scope it does not apply to. So as per India's 105, it is not covered. As per India's 41, it is not covered. 106 not covered. Not covered. So the scope, it should. It is important to know the scope, inclusions and exclusions largely. So this is exactly what we decided here. So this is done. Next, this is where it becomes important. So as I said, to start with defining what it is, the definitions are given clearly here. So are held for use in the production or supply of goods or services, for rental to others, or for administrative purposes. So what is administrative purpose? So either for rent or for your own admin purposes. So this also includes for your self-use and self-consumption. So this is given. And in general, these are tangible items. Again, this is a very important thing. Intangible things would not, goodwill might not come into this. It talks about tangible things. Expected to be used more than one period. Expected to be used more than one period. And held for use in supply, rental, administrative purpose. 1, 2, 3. This is exactly what it is. And then there are definitions which are given here. What is a bearer plant? What is carrying amount? What is cost? I quickly go through that. I don't want to buy hard or memorize this, but I just want to understand all of this. Okay. So this gives me a reasonable picture of the first sentence which I looked at it. Okay. The various terms which are used in the standard are given in 6.46. Okay. I'll just mark this here. Now, next is apply the revaluation and cost models. Okay. I want to understand what are this and interpret the difference between repairs and maintenance, replacement and inspection. Okay. These are some terms which I would like to, because I'm just getting a familiarity. It's like first look at what are the various terms and get into the detail. Account for the changes in depreciation method. What are the changes? And integrate the accounting for changes in existing decommissioning. So these are all helping me understand what should I focus upon. There are multiple things. Then I normally come on to the page where they gives overview. So here is where I want to spend a minute. One is recognition. Now recognition, there is initial cost and subsequent cost, right? Makes sense? Recognition, initial cost, subsequent cost. And within cost, what are the elements of cost and measurement cost? Now in terms of model, let's say there's cost model, there is the revaluation model, and we already looked at something about depreciation. In the objective, we mentioned about depreciation. This is about number 5. And there is something called impairment. And there's something called compensation of impairment. So this and this I'm connecting. In the objective, it has given a lot of things. So we are looking at it. And also, we need to understand measurement at recognition, when it comes to recognition, at recognition, after recognition, de-recognition, and disclosure, right? So these are quickly loading in my mind. I think we hardly spent 4 or 5 minutes here, but you understood the scope. Scope, you should move very fast. Here, memory is not important. Understanding is not important. Acquaintance. How fast can you get to this acquaintance? So this is about initial thing. And then there is something given about recognition. Probably since there is a table given, probable that future economic benefits will flow to entity and cost can be measured reliably. This is exactly when you can recognize the cost of the asset, where there is future economic flow and cost can be measured. The benefit and cost should be measured clearly. That is when you can recognize the cost. Okay, this is given something like this. Now, once I understand the basics, now this is where I understand the basics. I would quickly like to move to the end of the chapter. So I call it the sandwich method. You start with the most important thing and we quickly jump to the end. Sometimes the chapter summary is given and sometimes it's not given. So in this case, the summary is not given clearly. So there are some questions which are given. I would first understand what is the core of the question. Okay. Now, if I look at this, there is too much information here. What is the core of the question? Advice ABC on the cost that can be capitalized. Okay, cost that can be capitalized. This is the question here. So this is the question. Okay, cost that can be capitalized. Now, whatever information is irrelevant, these are variables which can change. Cost that can be capitalized. Next, journal entries with regard to revaluation. This is the question. Okay, I need to understand what are the journal entries with regard to revaluation. Next, what is the other question? How would the above changes in estimate be accounted? Accounting treatment. This is one of the objectives which we learned. Next, accounting for the above transaction. So largely there are questions about how do you account for the accounting treatment are also potential questions. And then changes in decommission. We already looked at it. How do you account for the changes in decommission? So this is so one thing which I'm noticing here is one more question about changes in the decommissioning liability. So whatever we read in the first two pages, those are the questions which are getting repeated. So revaluation. So you just have to go to the core of the questions. What is the heart of the question? Journal entries about revaluation. So class of property for disclosure. So every word I learned here and every word I learned here is something which is repeating in the question. So largely until now, decommissioning I saw three questions. We looked at depreciation, we looked at recognition, we looked at disclosures. These are the kind of questions which are repeating. So, which means as long as I understand this reasonably well, 60-70% of the chapter is covered. So, first I'll try to develop my understanding in this framework because there is unlimited text which has to be learned. So, since the questions are already given, I'll quickly try to go through the questions and the answers. So, that will give me what exactly is the nature of the entire chapter. So I will hardly spend 15 minutes in going through the questions. So now I know the outcomes. I know what are the questions which are asked. So the sandwich end is done, and then I'll accelerate the middle process, which will help me to know where to focus upon. What can I skip? What can I accelerate? Because I know what are the kind of questions which are being asked. So this way, you can save a couple of hours. Normally, if it takes 5 hours, by putting in 20 minutes in between, you can accelerate these things. One more exercise over and above this, if you are interested, you can quickly finish the index mapping. If you have already done it, you can very well go through that because index mapping has everything, right? So if you look at it, we saw a question on the recognition. We saw a question on the measurement of cost. We saw a question on the disclosure. So most of the questions which you are looking at are already there in this. So these few things before actually getting started will help you to narrow down what you have to study. So it's like mapping the specific things which you have to learn. So this way you do it. It won't solve everything, but you have to understand that learning happens in layers. So if you have to learn something in 9 hours, it should be 3 hours, later point of time 3 hours, later point of 3 hours. That is how the layers will evolve. You can't put in 9 hours at once and get extracted. There is only so much you can get at a particular point of time. Understood? Okay, so try this for this particular chapter. And after this, we'll discuss what worked and what did not work and what has to improve. Okay, so you can get started with this and take it whenever it is. Like you don't have a time limit, you work on it as a task based assignment. Next, we'll optimize time. Clear? All it does.